If you're having trouble automating third-party indicator signals with the Predator X on NinjaTrader, then this video is going to help resolve many of the common issues we run into. Now, as some of you may know, or maybe you're new here, the Predator X is an order entry and management tool for NinjaTrader that lets users create their own fully or semi-automated trading strategies. One of those features being the ability to automate third-party indicator draw object signals. So that can include things like maybe an arrow or even a text signal. But because we are working with third-party indicators, not everything is going to be coded the same way. This means that there may come times when we have to adjust our properties to make sure we can automate those signals. So the purpose of this video is not going to be an in-depth how-to video, but rather we're going to focus on troubleshooting points that seem to come up on a day-to-day basis. The steps in this video are going to help resolve 99% of the problems when it comes to draw object signals using the Predator X. So with that, let's get right into it. So like I mentioned in the intro, we're mainly sticking to the object signal troubleshooting. I am likely going to make a separate video that's going to concentrate on the plot signals if that's what you're having trouble with. We do have a separate troubleshooting guide specifically for the plots if that's something that you need. So all you have to do to find these in the user guide, especially if you're looking for some sort of help with the custom signals, just come down here and we have an entire section here that covers what signals are valid, troubleshooting, how they work, or even how to build your own. But again, what we're looking into today is mainly this object signal troubleshooting. So maybe you have a custom indicator that's giving you some sort of a signal and you find that the Predator is not taking a trade. So let's go through some of these troubleshooting steps and I'll try and provide some examples as well. And that way you can compare to your own indicators. And again, guys, not every indicator is coded the same way, but these steps should help resolve many of the common issues that we run into. So what I recommend if you're just getting started, this is your first time using the Predator, even actually if it's not your first time, watch this video here, this automate draw object signals video. This is going to be linked here. This is on the landing page for the custom signal section. This video is going to help cover every single step of how the object signals work. So things like what signals are actually valid, how we can extract the tag for that signal, how we can use it as an entry, how we can use it as a filter or even an exit. So before we even start with any troubleshooting steps, make sure you watch this video carefully. It's going to have the most information, even more so than this video you're watching now. So again, make sure you watch this video. I'll link it up here as well. Now, if you watch this video, you're still having trouble, not a problem. Let's start going through the steps. So the first step is confirm you have the latest version. This will always display the latest version of the Predator X. So as of this video, we are sitting at 3.0.2.8. By the time you watch this video, we will likely have an even newer version. And sometimes new versions will include some bug fixes that we may have found. Always, 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 before you start troubleshooting anything, make sure you are on the latest version. If you need steps on how to upgrade, we have a link for that right here as well. Now, confirming the latest version, number one step, the most important. But before we jump headfirst into signal troubleshooting, we have to make sure we follow some of the basics. Here I have a separate general how to enter trades troubleshooting guide. And this is going to run through just more general steps. So again, make sure you have the latest version. And then just general steps that will apply to any auto entry, not just signals, but this could be reversals, inside bars, anything else that you're trading. This will apply in general. So always make sure these are okay before we move on to the signals. So make sure you have at least one target selected. And then this next step, especially when it comes to troubleshooting, is how to reset your template back to default. I see this every single day. We get new users who start the Predator. I get it, you're excited, you see a lot of options, and you just want to start clicking on everything. The problem comes if you click on too many things, it will eventually filter out to the point where it won't allow it to take trades because there are so many conditions that all of those conditions can never be true at the same time. So what I recommend, especially if you're starting out or you're just going through basic troubleshooting, always just reset your template, go back to the default settings, and we're going to start fresh, start with a brand new template, and that way we can build it from scratch and make sure everything is getting set up properly from the very beginning. Now over here, we also have some more general trading tips. So if we click on that, so things like clearing old strategies. If you have a whole list inside your strategies tab, make sure all of those are cleared. Always, again, start with fresh templates. It is always a good idea to reload historical data in NinjaScript. Just make sure, again, everything is fresh. Things like show historical trades. If you're running this strategy live, the show historical trades can interfere with past performance. Same with your order fill resolution. Unless you're doing historical backtest, this should always be set to standard. Again, all of these can interfere with just the general running of the strategy. And then just things like interrupting your data series. So if you're switching time frames or the instrument or the bar size while your strategy is still enabled, this is a no-go with strategies on NinjaTrader. This is not just the Predator, this is any strategy on NinjaTrader. So always make sure, disable the strategy first, and then re-enable once everything is loaded. Again, guys, these are just basic troubleshooting tips that we have to go through before we even start looking at the signals. And then lastly, just make sure you actually have it enabled. With the custom signals, you should see an entry 1 up in the top right-hand corner. It will be in white as well. So that will tell you, yes, it's turned on. And lastly, you have your auto entry controls. Again, make sure you have auto on, long and short, all in white. This will mean they are turned on. If you see they are transparent, that means they are off and it's not going to allow any auto entries. So again, these are all steps that are going to apply to any auto entry with the Predator, not just the signals. So always, always, always make sure we start with the basics before we start getting into the more complex scenarios. And then the final step here is just if you're using signals, then obviously at this point, now we can go to our actual troubleshooting steps. All right, so you watched the automate draw object signal video to understand how these draw objects work. And you also went through the basic troubleshooting tips, but we're still having issues automating our indicators. So let's move on to the next steps, which should help resolve pretty much any issue you have when it comes to these draw object signals. So the next step is to use separate windows for your charts. Do not use tabs or minimize windows. So the reason behind this tip is that not every indicator is going to be coded in a way that exposes the draw object while the chart is not in focus. So this is actually by default, many indicators are coded this way. It helps save on resources when your indicator is not in focus. But in this case, because we do need to extract that draw object signal, if it's not in focus, it may not be able to read it. So let me run through a quick example of something that comes up quite a bit. And what I see is sometimes traders like to have multiple strategies running on separate tabs. It helps keep everything clean, but when it comes to draw object signals, again, it depends how they were coded, but by default, a lot of them will have the same issue. So let me enable the Predator here. I'm going to run through an example just with our basic ORB strategy. So once we break above this range, we should get an arrow, and the Predator is going to take the trade on that arrow. So let's rewind here. Now, this is the problem we run into, is if you're trading with multiple tabs, sometimes you have the Predator, everything is enabled as it should be, everything is working fine, and then maybe you switch to a different tab, maybe you want to run a separate strategy, or you're looking at a different time frame, whatever it may be. So we're just waiting for a break above this, and then you'll notice that it broke above. So you go back to your main strategy and you see, hey, I had some signals and it didn't take those trades. Well, again, a lot of these indicators are going to be coded in this way. Now, there are a few ways to get around this, especially if you have access to the indicator code itself. I know a lot of you guys are creating your own indicators. So if that's the case and you want to be able to take these draw object signals in a different tab, just look for something that says is suspended while inactive. And we're going to change this to false. Now, all you have to do is compile that. And guys, obviously this step is only if you have access to the code. A lot of third-party vendors will not give you access. So for those vendors, you will have to just have a separate window. And then you may just have to reload the indicator itself. Just make sure everything is fresh after doing that update to your code. But now, if we were to run it in the same scenario, we switch to a different tab while it's still active in the other one. If that suspended while inactive is false, once this one closes, it should enter us. So that's all it is. It's just a safety precaution. If you're using multiple tabs, the best course of action, just to make sure you're safe, you can just disable the strategy, move to a new window. So once you move it to a different window, just have it on its own. Make sure it's always open, never minimize it. And then you're free to look at any other chart without having to worry if it's going to take that signal or not. So that's all that step is. Let's move on to the next one. All right, your next step, and probably arguably should have been above step number 2, is checking your validation system. Now, this is the most important part. This is what's going to tell you if your indicator is actually valid or not. So how does the validation system work? Let's go back to our chart over here. When it comes to using the Predator X draw object system, we have to extract the tag data from our draw object. So how we do that? Let's just double click on our draw object and you're going to see the tag info right inside the draw object properties. So without going into too much detail on the types of signals that we're looking for and what's actually valid, because the other video goes into it in a lot more detail. It explains it a lot more clearly and shows multiple examples of what we're looking for. But just as a quick rundown, all we're looking for is the text before any number. So in this case, we're looking at above upper and below lower. So above upper is when we go up. If we scroll back to this other day, when it crossed below the range, we click on that one, that gives us below lower. So that is all that we have to type into the Predator, and it has to match 100% exactly how it's typed out in here. So how does that look? Let's go into our properties and we're going to open up a custom signal. And we're going to do one entry signal for this example. Again, we are looking at object mode. Our long signal is going to be above upper. Our short signal is going to be below lower. So whenever you're using the custom signal system, you're going to see a validation system up here. What this is going to show is your long tag, that's the L, and then your short tag, that is the S. If you see a check mark, all that means is while you were enabling the strategy, it went through each signal and it found one that matched with your tag. So that's telling you, yes, this exact tag exists and it should be good to take more trades. Now let's go back into the properties and let's say you missed an uppercase. So above upper with a lowercase. What you're going to see now is when we enable it, you're going to see this hourglass. And all this hourglass is telling you is, hey, I looked through all of the signals and I did not actually find one that matches with this tag. So 99% of the time, that means there was some sort of a typo. So if that's the case, just go back into the draw object, and every single tag, depending on the indicator you're using, is going to be different from indicator to indicator. So always, guys, make sure you check the tag for whatever indicator you're using. Never rely on somebody else's template, because there is a chance they could have changed the tag at some point. Always, always, always just click on that signal yourself, verify the tag information so you can update it accordingly. So let me change this back to an uppercase. Now, there are some rare cases, and I'm using this ORB as an example because this is where I see it the most often. You sometimes go to enable it. It's an indicator that you've used multiple times and you have everything saved. You know this by heart, and you see some sort of an hourglass. And again, I see this with this indicator specifically. I've seen it with others, but this shows a good example. But if you ever see that you do get an hourglass and you don't know why it's giving you that when you first loaded, just again, guys, double check those tags. So here we can see we only have above upper. So what that means is if we scroll back, there could be cases where that signal just hasn't actually formed yet. Sometimes we get multiple days where it's only breaking out in one direction. So if that's the case, it may not show up here. So again, all this validation system is doing is it's showing you if whatever you typed in here matches with an existing signal. If that signal hasn't formed yet, there's nothing to match it with. So for that reason, you would get an hourglass. But again, guys, just make sure you always check those draw objects. Just make sure all of them actually exist and you have all of the tag info typed out properly. In this scenario, if it was to break below the range, then it would automatically validate. This should turn into a check mark and it will take the trade, but you just got to make sure you 100% have the correct tag. Again, 99% of the time, it is some sort of a typo, but this would be some sort of a rare case scenario. So again, always, always, always just double click on that signal, verify the information yourself, make sure everything is actually on the chart and typed out 100% as you see it here, minus the numbers. All right, so that covers the main validation system, kind of what we're looking for, just making sure we have that check mark. But now let's move on to the color identifier. So the purpose of the color identifier is just to make sure we can separate certain signals if they share the same tag. All right, so let's come to this Ninja indicator as an example. So what many vendors out there do is if you click on their signals, you will see the exact same tag info between their longs and their shorts. The only difference being is they use a separate color. So the setup process for all of this is pretty much the same. We just have to take a note of the color itself. So what I like to do, especially with these big ones, I just take a screenshot. And then from here, I just extract the tag or the text. And then sometimes you have to copy the whole thing. We just don't include this number. So let's go into the Predator, and it's the exact same setup process. We're going to do an entry signal, object mode. We're just going to type in the tag, remove the number if you copied it this way. Just make sure you leave that period. I'm going to copy this same thing for the short signal. Now, you only ever need a color identifier if your long and short tags are the same. If they're different, I recommend just leaving this off. It's one less thing to worry about, and it'll actually run just a little bit better. But in this case, because they are using the exact same tag between the long and the short, let's select that color identifier, and we just have to match those same colors. I'm going to show Dodger Blue, that's for the long. For the short, it's hot pink, but let's say we select maybe magenta. This is the wrong color, but let's see what happens. All right, so this is an example of our validation system when it comes to using a color identifier. So if your tag is okay, you're going to see a check mark. So that's just telling you the actual tag signal is reading fine, everything is working. But if you are using a color identifier, as you can see, the longs, we typed in the Dodger blue. So that turns that same Dodger blue color. But for the shorts, it's supposed to be hot pink. We typed in a different color, so it's not going to color in. So if you're using a color identifier and you use the wrong color, it's not going to take any trades. So just keep that in mind. When using the color identifier, you must select the correct color. Let's go back into the properties and change this to the correct color, so hot pink. All right, once we select the correct color and we enable it, you'll find over here in your validation system, you're going to see not only the correct tag with the check mark, you're also going to find the correct color for both your long and your short entries. And now it should automate any signal that matches this tag as soon as it detects it. So that's all it is. It's just making sure you're matching your correct tag with your signal and also matching the correct color if your signal calls for that color match. But now let's move on to our next step. All right, so your validation system all checks out. That's also all good. You get your check mark, you get the color if that's what you're using, but it's still not taking trades. So let's move on to step number 4. And this one is probably one that causes the most confusion. And that is referring to the bars ago entry. And what this is doing is it's just checking to see what bar we're actually looking at when we enter a trade. I have a short video here as well, but let's run through a quick example. All right, so here we're back looking at this ORB indicator, and all we're looking at is this bars ago entry. Now, most indicators, probably 95% of them, are going to need a value of 1. And all that's saying is while your bar is forming, it's looking at 1 candle back for a signal. So essentially, it's always looking on bar close. So as soon as this bar closes and the new one forms, it's going to look at this bar for a signal. So let's see how that looks. So right now we're looking at this bar. As soon as this bar closed, this new bar opened, it looks at 1 bar to the left. That's your bars ago 1. When it comes to bars ago 1, we are just looking at 1 candle back. So this signal with this specific indicator, it did not create this signal until this bar closed and this one opened. So with bars ago 1, we are just looking at this bar. It detects the signal. It gets us into the trade. For most of you out there, bars ago 1 is going to be default. That is what your indicator is going to take. This is going to be true for most indicators out there. What I see happening quite often is changing this to bars ago entry 0. All this is doing, bars ago entry 0, is just looking at the most current bar for that signal. So let me play it again. So it's looking for a signal to form intrabar. So while it's still forming. So because this one did not create that signal until after it closed, it now moves on to only look for this bar. And for that reason, it's not going to take the trade. Now, of course, there is a reason to be able to change it to bars ago 0. And that is because some indicators can actually form signals while the bar is still forming. So to do that, again, I'm going to show you a quick example here. To make this specific indicator give a signal while the bar is still forming, you need to come in here. Typically, if your indicator forms a signal while it's still forming, the calculate method will be on each tick or on price change. This gives real intrabar data. So if we were to change this to on price change, and then keeping that same bars ago entry 0, we'll see now while this bar was still forming, it gave us that signal and the predator is able to pick up on that signal while the bar is still forming. So that is the main difference between Barsago entry 1 and Barsago entry 0. It's just the bar it's looking at to actually detect the signal. All right, so your Barsago entry is also set at 1. Everything is good. Everything should be reading on the correct candle. Let's move on to the next step. And again, this is one that comes up quite a bit, and that is using enter at break of candle. And all this option does is it requires the price to go either above the previous bar's high if you're going long, or the price to go below the previous bar's low if you're going short. So again, we have a short video here if you need an example. We have some screenshots, but let's run through a quick example. So here I'm going to go, again, using the opening range. I'm using the enter at high-low break. So here I'm using the ORB again as an example. So here we got a signal, but the price never went under the previous bar's low, so we did not get a short entry. Here again, we got another signal, but the price never went under the low of that previous bar. Again, no entry signal. Let's see if we get another one. All right, so here we get our third signal, but the price finally did go underneath the low of the previous bar. So that one gets us into the trade. So again, this is a very common scenario when this option is enabled. The price isn't always going to break past the previous bar's high or low. So that would also prevent trades from happening. All right, now we're moving on to the last few steps here. These are going to go by pretty quick. The next step is just check other filters. And this one ties in a lot more with the basic troubleshooting where we reset our template. One of the main reasons I always suggest to reset your template, especially if you're either starting out or trying to troubleshoot some sort of no trade condition. With the Predator, we have the ability to add multiple indicator filters or additional filters as well. So things like moving average filters, a super trend, we can add time limits, P&L kill switches, even trade counts. All of these things can and will prevent trades when those specific conditions are met. So because of that, I always recommend reset your template, make sure all of the filters are removed first. And then once we get it working, we can start adding everything back in and we can create our perfect strategy. But we need to start with the basics first. Always start with a fresh template and build it up from there. So that's all that one is. It's just make sure you're starting with a clean template and then we can build after. Now, let's go to step 7. This one is not as common, but it is something I run into every once in a while. And the reason for this step is, unfortunately, there are some indicators out there that are made to look a lot better than they actually are. So we'll take this one for an example. This one caused a lot of headaches when we were first starting out with the custom signal system, but we've since added this to our troubleshooting guide and we're able to figure these ones out a lot quicker now. So what is going on in this screenshot? Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can actually see what's going on. So with this specific indicator, the format for the signals appear to be good. It uses a tag plus current bar. The Predator was able to validate the signals because as we're loading it up, all the signals, everything appear to be in the correct format. Now, the problem with this specific indicator, and we've ran into a couple other ones as well, but this was one of the main ones that was being used at the time. So you would get a signal, this little red triangle or this green triangle as well. The problem we were running into, again, it wasn't taking any trades. I had a lot of people asking, Dre, what's going on? I set everything up properly. After some investigation, what we ended up finding out was this signal was not actually printing as soon as the bar closed. In fact, I ended up making a separate indicator that was able to print an actual signal on the bar where this triangle actually printed. So it wasn't until all of these bars passed, the move already happened, and only then did this triangle actually appear on the chart. So it was printing a signal long after the move already happened. And the exact same thing happened when we were going long. We would not see this green triangle until all this move already happened. And only when this bar closed and our arrow appeared, that's on the exact bar that this triangle appeared. So with the Predator, unfortunately, even with all of its features, we cannot go back in time and take a trade that did not actually happen during that time. Again, some indicators, I don't know why they coded it this way, but again, some indicators, unfortunately, they're coded in a way that are just made to look a lot better than they actually are. So always keep that in mind. Always take note of when your indicator actually prints a signal. All right, and now we're moving on to the final diagnostic step. And this one, luckily, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it causes the most amount of confusion. So what this step refers to is when a developer adds a number to the actual tag portion of your indicator signal. So as an example, if you've watched the main automate objects video, you'll know that in order to automate indicator signals, we need some sort of a tag plus the current barcode. And all this current barcode is referring to, if we go to our chart, if we go to the very, very beginning of our chart, whatever bar is number 1, that is considered current bar number 1. And then it counts up from there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up until you reach the actual current bar. So whatever number starting from 1 all the way to the current bar. So typically the reason we don't include a number in our tag is because all we're trying to do is match up the tag. And if that tag matches the current bar that we're looking at and we get a match, that's when we create our entry signal. But in these very rare scenarios, sometimes the developer will add some sort of a number to the very end of your tag, which can kind of mix with the current barcode. So there are a few ways we can spot when this actually happens. So the first way we can spot this, and this is only if you have access to the code. I'll show you a different way if you don't. But if you do have access to the code, you would just look at the tag that is this first initial text. If you see a number at the very end, this is part of your tag. You will need to include this number inside your entry tag for the Predator X. And just as an example, I temporarily modified this ORB indicator. Don't worry, if you downloaded this free ORB indicator, yours doesn't have this number. I just did this for the video. But this is what you would typically encounter. It would be your tag and then a number. And then same thing for your short, a tag, and then a number. So if we go into the properties, you would start off seemingly normal. You have your tag and a number that's gradually increasing, and everything looks normal. But what you may notice is sometimes these numbers go from very high to a much lower number. So 21,051. And then all of a sudden we're down to 11,729. And then back up to 22,000. If you see something like this where it starts high, goes slow, back high, that's usually a telltale sign that there may be something wrong with the number. Because as you go down, all of these numbers should keep increasing. Because again, you're just setting a signal on the current bar at the time that signal was printed. So always the latest signal should have the highest number. Or at the bottom of the list, it should be the highest number. Now, I get that not always are we going to have access to the code itself, or maybe you're just not comfortable going into the code itself. So another way we can tell if your indicator may have a number is simply by modifying the number of bars you have on the chart. So what I mean by that, just go to data series, and this can be temporary. You can change it back after you confirm. But if you suspect something is wrong, just try these steps. It might actually help save you some time. So what I like to do, go to the time frame, load some bars. I usually load maybe 500 bars. So what this is going to do is it's just going to limit the number of bars that are shown on your chart. So now you're only looking at 500 bars maximum. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way until 500. So if you go back into the draw object properties and you see that the number is much higher than that 500 bar limit you set. So in this case, we have 2,491, 493, and 499. So that already tells us, because we can't go above 500, this tells me that this number 2, is not actually counting the current bar. That's just counting the tag itself. So again, we limit it to 500. This should be 499. So inside the Predator properties, in order to automate this specific indicator, we would just need to add that extra number that was added to the tag. So below lower and then 2, and then above upper, it didn't show in this last example, but it was set at 1. And then once you verify everything, you can go back to your regular bars. And we enable everything. And now you should see a check mark for both above upper 1, below lower 2. And again, guys, don't use this for the ORB. I just modified this for this specific example. But this is a scenario that we run into every once in a while. Just some developers like to add a number at the end of their tag. All right, guys, we're almost at the end of the video. I just want to cover one last little bit. So what happens if we arrive to the final step and we're still having issues? None of these steps seem to have fixed the problem, or maybe something just doesn't quite make sense and you need a little bit more explanation. Don't worry, guys, I am here to help. But in order for me to be able to help you efficiently, I am going to need some information in order to get a full picture of what's going on. So what this final step goes over is just the information that I need. So way too often, I get somebody in the chat or somebody will email me and they'll take a little screenshot like this and say, Dre, it's not working, what's going on? I don't really have an answer for that. I have no idea what's going on from a little screenshot like this. Like we just went over, there are a lot of steps that can prevent trades. So in order to help you properly, I need a full picture. So what I ask for, if you need help with anything, you can send this either in an email, support@tradesaber.com, or you can DM me on Discord or even just tag me on the chat. I try to reply everyone as soon as possible. But all I need in order to help you guys more efficiently is a screenshot of the entire screen. So include the entire ChartTrader panel with the version number showing. You can split this into multiple if the ChartTrader panel is a little too big. Sometimes it won't show depending on your screen resolution. So if that's the case, just send multiple screenshots, but please send that version number. That again is our very first step that we need to verify. And then make sure you include the entire chart with the validation system. If you don't include this validation system up here, I can't really help you with the signals, because this will tell me if the tag is actually correct and everything seems to be reading properly. So without this showing, this is going to be one of the first things I'm going to ask for. And guys, please point to the signal that it was supposed to take. So very often I get these charts sent into me where you guys have maybe 10 plus indicators on a single chart. And again, I get a little screenshot and you're just asking what's happening, why isn't it taking trades? I don't know what's going on your chart either. A lot of the time, I don't trade with that many indicators myself. So if you're using multiple indicators, please let me know which ones you're intending to use and where is your intended entry point. So whatever that may be, whether you're entering at a crossover of some sort, or it's giving you some sort of an arrow entry signal, anything that comes to mind, just please try and provide as much information as possible. That will help me a lot more than you think. And then also, guys, in your screenshot, please include the top toolbar and the lower timestamp. And the reason being is this top toolbar is going to help me see whether you're in a historical mode or real time. So a lot of the times there's little bits of differences in where it takes trades. That will just help me see if there's some sort of a historical trade that may be interfering. And same thing with the lower timestamp. One of the issues we've been running into is our templates are set to run mainly on Eastern or Central time. So that works great if you happen to live in North America and that is your actual time zone, because everything should match up. But if you're trading in Europe, Australia, Asia, I know a lot of the time I'll get some members that load up a template that's set to a different time zone, and then it won't actually take any trades when they're intending to. So again, the timestamp just helps me verify if you're trading on the same time, or maybe you're on a different time and maybe a filter is getting in the way. So again, guys, it's not always just about narrowing down a specific point. It's just trying to get a full picture of everything that's going on, because there are a lot of moving parts. Sometimes we need to look at different things. So just as an example of what I'm looking for, again, we're just going to expand this so I can see this as well. And then if you don't know how to take a screenshot, just press Windows, Shift, and S on your keyboard, and you should be able to just take an entire screenshot like this. And then you can paste this directly on the chart. You can even take an arrow and say, this is where I want to enter. So this would be an example of a good screenshot, and then just include the version number as well. And then just send me the draw object properties for your indicator as well. This will again help me see if that indicator is actually valid to be traded. So just double click on that and then take a screenshot of each indicator that you plan to trade. So in this case, below lower, and then we go to the other signal and then we say above upper. Make sure you take a screenshot of the entire thing with the entire text showing and all of the configured sections showing as well. And for the very final step, I will also need to see your settings. This way I can test exactly what you're seeing. And how you do that, just go into the Predator properties. You can come down here to the template section, just save your template. You can call this my template for Dre, or whatever name you want to give it. Just save it. And then all you have to do, go into your documents folder, go to NinjaTrader, templates, go to strategy, and then click on the Predator X order entry LT, and then take your template you just saved and attach that to the file that you're sending me, either again on Discord or email support@tradesaber.com. And this will give me all of the information I need in order to help you as quickly as possible. But I think I'm going to cut the video here. This video came out much longer than I intended, but I really hope you guys found something useful in here. As always, take care, enjoy.